Hello, welcome to Instant Insights. At GlobalData Thematic Intelligence, we track over 100 tech, industry, ESG, and macro themes impacting all major sectors. I'm Thomas Pothalingam, and today I'm joined by Pinky Hiranandani to talk about ESG frameworks. Hi, Pinky. How are you?
Hi, Thomas. I'm good.
Okay, you recently updated our ESG framework, which can be used to assess a company's ESG performance, as well as the factors that contribute to negative ESG consequences and mitigating actions that can improve a company's ESG performance. These are important issues that guide decision making in the largest companies globally. Gaining some insight into what influences businesses' operations is really valuable, especially in the changing world of sustainability and ESG more broadly. And I'd like to start by asking you if you could broadly tell us why should companies care about their ESG credentials?
Sure, Thomas. Companies should care about their ESG credentials because stakeholders are demanding greater transparency and action on a full spectrum of ESG. So, numerous companies globally are actually adapting their operations and supply chains to manage an influx of new ESG related regulations. So, these regulations include mandatory ESG reporting, emissions pricing, and laws governing supplier due diligence. Especially the last 2 years have been a stark reminder of why ESG needs to be taken seriously. There have been numerous CEOs and boardrooms which have come under financial, legal, and public pressure for failing to properly address key ESG issues. For example, questionable carbon offset schemes have resulted in negative press for companies like Disney, Apple, and Shell. Also in 2024, a US government investigation found that several major automotive companies like BMW, Jaguar, Land Rover, and Volkswagen had tangible links to forced labor across their supply chains. So, companies who do not take a forward thinking approach to mitigating ESG risk will face backlash from not only the regulators, but also investors, lenders, customers, suppliers, and employees.
So, what are the benefits for companies adopting an ESG framework?
So there are several benefits for companies that adopt an ESG framework. For example, companies are often better positioned to mitigate ESG risk early, which can provide them long-term success. It can also help companies gain a competitive advantage as they can identify ESG risks very early. And also, it helps companies identify and mitigate risk, which thereby reduces the likelihood of costly incidents and help them comply with the emerging ESG related regulations. Also, implementing an ESG framework can help enhance a company's reputation and brand value, which can actually attract investors, employees, and customers who prioritize sustainability and ethical practices.
Thank you for that breakdown. It was really informative. I'd like to find out more about the governance aspect of ESG. So, how important is corporate governance in guiding ESG progress in companies?
I think governance is quite important and it's often the most overlooked pillar of ESG. However, companies cannot afford to overlook the importance of governance while they are setting or executing an ESG plan, as we have seen that poor governance can hurt CEOs. We have seen failures in corporate governance from aggressive tax avoidance to corruption, excessive executive remuneration, and relentless lobbying. So, all of this has meant that the society is losing trust in big business. Some of the recent examples that I can think of include collapse of crypto trading platform FTX, which brought down by the revelation of fraudulent intercompany transfers of client funds by its CEOs. And by March 2024, its CEOs had been sentenced to 25 years in prison for presiding over a total failure of corporate governance. Another poor governance example includes resignation of Alison Rose, who was the CEO of the UK bank NatWest after she shared confidential data of the politician Nigel Farage with a BBC journalist. So these examples prove that, lax governance can have severe consequences such as, financial losses, reputational damage. And so it's quite important to have, governance practices.
Very much so. So companies frequently face accusations of greenwashing or obscuring poor ESG performances. But on the flip side, as part of my work for GlobalData's Net Zero and Tech report, some companies deserve praise for how they've enthusiastically embedded ESG considerations into their operations. Can you give me a brief introduction to ESG disclosure frameworks and what they mean for companies?
Sure. So, as you see, for the last 10 years, we've seen there are many companies that have reported voluntarily without pressure from the regulators. And for reporting, they've used various frameworks and standards that basically tell them, what information they should disclose and how should it work. So these frameworks include Global Reporting Initiative, Sustainability Accounting Standards Board, Task Force on Climate-Related Financial Disclosures, and CDP. So now more companies are being required to report by regulation, and this is happening everywhere, including the US, the UK, EU, China, and India. So some of these are based on standards which are developed by International Accounting Standards Board, which sets standards for financial reporting. So regulatory requirements, they are pretty similar in many cases to the voluntary reporting frameworks. So companies that have already been reporting voluntarily will have an easier time complying with these new laws. Now, with regards to our ESG framework, it actually encompasses a broad range of factors, and companies that use a framework like ours will always be better prepared when they're required to disclose related information, whether that's related to greenhouse gas emissions, deforestation, or labor issues like forced labor.
So you've very clearly broken down the ESG framework, discussing what it is, why companies and their senior executives should care about it. And you've also discussed the importance of corporate governance and provided some great insight into what ESG disclosure frameworks entail. To conclude, can you briefly summarize the risks associated with not adopting an ESG framework?
Sure. So there can be several risks associated with not adopting an ESG framework, like companies may struggle to meet the increasing regulatory requirements, which may lead to fines and legal issues. And also, poor ESG practices can lead to negative publicity and harm a company's reputation. And companies without a strong ESG practice may find it difficult to attract investments, which could face higher capital costs. And companies that do not address ESG issues may be more vulnerable to ESG risks, which can lead to operational and financial disruption. Lastly, without strong ESG practices, companies may lose their competitive advantage.
So as a result of this, ESG performance must be a significant concern for C-suite executives?
Absolutely. So ESG performance is a significant concern for C-level executives because of the increasing investor pressure and the regulatory developments, which if not complied with can lead to penalties. So executives need to recognize that strong ESG performance can lead to enhanced reputation and brand value. It can help them reduce risk and also improve their long-term financial performance. So all of this makes it crucial for companies to integrate ESG considerations into their strategic planning and operations.
Thank you very much, Pinky, for these insights. You can find our ESG framework report on the Intelligence Center and in the report store. Thanks for listening, and from us in Thematic Intelligence, see you next time.